Well, welcome back to Social Live. I'm Ben Pankinen, and I am here from Social Assurance talking about all things community banking. And I am joined today with a couple special guests to talk with us about being a leader in your community. I've got Tim Martinson and Kate Cwieka with me today. And I'm excited to see all of the conversations we've been talking about this week. So welcome, Kate and Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we've been talking a lot about different practices in social, but the three of us have come together a little bit in a group called Social Bankers as well. Tim, you kind of took the ball and started running with, and we've joined along in this movement, and it's been really exciting to see. But I thought maybe first things first, we could get started just getting to know both of you a little bit. Kate, you want to start a little bit? You've been in community banking for a while now, but you've had a lot of background before you got into that space. So can you give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. Way back like 12 years ago, I was working really as an agency of one, starting out like digital marketing, self-taught, learned to build WordPress websites and so forth, and got in the initial blogger craze. I did have, I will admittedly say, a lifestyle and fashion blog that I ran for some time, and learned a lot then, and just started working, producing things like Facebook pages and various social media channels for different businesses out there that I worked with. That was really the start of it, and then luckily got picked up by an agency and started working full time. And they were specifically a digital marketing and web design agency. We worked with all different clients, and it was a really great experience to learn a lot. And then after being there for a few years, I moved on to Avidia, and I'm at Avidia Bank now in Massachusetts, and I've been there for 5 years, overseeing our social media, our PR, communications, and our content marketing. So it's been quite a journey, but it's been pretty interesting and really fun for sure.
Awesome. And Tim, you came into community banking a little while ago as well with, in some ways, a similar background.
Some ways similar, a few ways a little bit differently. I started off as a Spanish teacher, if you can believe that, and I lasted for about 2 months, and then decided that wasn't for me. Got into publishing and got into some different types of jobs within the Spanish language world. One of those jobs was at an agency that we did work for different telecommunications companies, all in Spanish. So that was really my introduction to the agency world. From there, I found it was really just easier to drop the Spanish speaking part, that what I brought to the table was stronger on the interactive side and the digital side than what I could possibly bring as a non-native speaker of the language on the Spanish side. And then my introduction to community banking came from several years, like Kate, in the agency world. And I got laid off from one particular job, and a couple of days later, I had some connections. My dad used to work at North American Banking Company, where I am now, and they called me and said, "Would you like to come and help us stand up our social media sites, our social media platforms, and our website?" So I did that for about 2 years, and as a freelancer, and then went back to the agency world for a year, where I worked at a branding agency. We did website builds, we did anything interactive. We were a part of it, and I found myself sort of longing to come back to community banking and working on the marketing side. I just wasn't sure how to do it. I got stuck in a career path that I really didn't want anymore, where I was working on operations at an agency. And Kate, you're familiar with that side of the stick, that you're basically managing time and resources and not so much creative projects. And got a call out of the blue from the bank again saying, "We'd like to bring you back." And I've been here now for 3 years since then. So kind of a roundabout way into the business, but I can't ever see leaving it at the same time.
That's awesome. Well, I love that both of you came from agency backgrounds. I think I think that's really exciting. And you both have some really interesting backgrounds. Emily just posted to us and said she really wants to see this blog, Kate. So you might have to share that with us. Do you still keep it active?
I don't actually. It's no longer out there. I'm sure I could find some remnants of it, but yeah, certainly happy to dig it up and share it in the group.
Those of us old website developers know how to use this thing called the Wayback Machine. So if you share a little URL, we might go find some photos. That's awesome. Well, we had some other people mentioning, out to Tim, what exactly can't Tim do? And our friend Heidi is also giving you a little shout out there in Spanish.
Muy bien.
Tim, do you still use your Spanish in your day job?
No, I don't. It's one of those skills. I used to say it was like riding a bike where you could jump back on it. It's not. It's a very much a degradable skill. If you don't keep it up, it'll slip away. I can have a conversation just fine, but if I had to jump in and like we had a situation a couple of years ago where I had to someone called and didn't speak English, they spoke Spanish. I understood the language just fine. I didn't understand what they were talking about in terms of the banking transaction. So I was pretty much next to useless in that case.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to ask you both some questions about the transition from the agency world into community banking, because there's sort of this very different scenario. So when you're working with an agency and you've got a lot of different brands to market from, sometimes you have the speed of that feels a little bit different. You also have sort of a different collaboration between a team of marketers that are sort of solely focused on that, as opposed to a bank where you're also delivering the service as well as marketing it. Kate, how was that transition for you?
It was definitely an interesting one. When I was brought on board, it was specifically to get us up and running for our social media, which was something that I was very well acquainted with being at the agency, because we work specifically with businesses that were looking to implement that. But then there's also that culture shift too. So trying to influence that is really difficult. And from the agency side, you don't really see that often. You don't really participate in that whole culture shift. Just more you're implementing a plan for people a lot of times. But that was something that was a little bit different for me to get used to and make sure that we're educating our executives, making sure that people were on board with what we were doing, that they had a good understanding of it, because it is a lot of investment. And of course, you're hiring me as an employee. So I'm not just here as, a 6-month contract to do a couple things or to put out some keywords for you. It's, a whole digital transformation. So, that was an adjustment, but I also think it was beneficial too for the organization, because you get an outside perspective. I think a lot of times and even now, I've been there for a few years, I get stuck in this hole of, what are other banks doing in the area and what do I need to look at? But, when you have that outside perspective of, what are people doing in just other industries, and how can we level set with them and raise the bar higher? Because traditionally, banking or any regulated industry for that reason is, very far behind when it comes to any sort of digital marketing or even, digital technology.
And the agency you were working for did have a couple clients in the financial services space, right?
Yeah, we had a credit union and a bank that were in the space.
Okay. And then a variety of other types of businesses as well?
Yeah, we had dry cleaners, veterinary services, a really big veterinary chain. We had legal. We had some healthcare services, just a whole bunch that we dealt with from day to day.
So what's the weirdest thing that you've ever marketed?
Well, we got hired for this lab that was a horse excrement testing facility. And they were actually very digital forward, which was great. Didn't know how to implement it, they knew it was where they needed to be. So we built them a website, we did Google advertising for them, and then Facebook, we built them a whole social media following and even did some Facebook advertising. So that was really interesting. So when people say you can't sell horse excrement online, at least testing. You certainly can.
That's awesome. I feel like that there were probably a lot of good inside jokes at the agency about that client.
There were, and the client took it really well too. We would definitely joke about it on the phone with them, and we actually we still talk about it obviously to this day, but also have used it in some examples to other potential clients out there too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, Tim, how about for you? What was that transition like, moving into the bank and then back into the bank? What was that like?
Moving into the bank, so like I said, I was brought on as a freelancer. So we started up and we just started asking questions, and and looking around, like Kate said, at different industries, see what people are doing. We brought in some employees. We talked to some other people, different millennial friends that we had, and just said, what would you like to see from social media from a bank? And built our base up from there. So for the 2 years, we sort of were running this program of building up the brand awareness of the bank, figuring out on the fly, literally, how we were going to do it. And then in that year between, when I came back, things changed dramatically in social media. Went from just posting a couple links here and there on your Facebook page to suddenly becoming video producers, knowing how to do that, and being able to produce things on Instagram quickly, and acting more in the moment than necessarily planning out your monthly set of posts. That changed, and that was one of the things when I came back that I started reaching out to people like Kate and people like Emily Mays, who's I think chimed in a couple times here already, and just started picking their brains and asking them questions like, well, how did you do that? And never expected in a million years that they would actually respond. I think Kate responded within about 10 minutes and Emily probably the same, just out of the blue requests. So, but in terms of transitioning back and forth, the thing I learned most about working at a bank is patience. Things move very, agency, you're just going, you're constantly moving from one meeting to the next. You're making a decision on the fly, whether sometimes it's not the best one, but it's the decision that you make. In banking, you have to be much more methodical. Like Kate mentioned, you have got regulatory issues, you've got different things that you just don't know about if you're coming from an agency world. Like, well, wait a minute, I can't talk about mortgage rates? Well, why not? And learning from that process was the hardest part about coming back, because the expectations that regulators put on banks in that year in between that I took off, well, I didn't take it off, but I was working at an agency. The expectations for what social media was changed overnight. And suddenly we had to tag everything member FDIC. We had to add equal housing lender. You had to make sure this, thick packet of rules was being followed. And that was really one of the hardest things for me. And, like we were alluding to, that's one of the reasons why I started reaching out to people like Kate and Emily and Tim Stark and those folks to sort of get a better feel for what it was that I was encountering on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, Kate, we were chatting earlier this week about PPP loans and just how fast things are changing in that space. What's that done within the bank as far as the communication and the role that marketing's faced in the last couple of months?
Yeah, I think it's, banking and the marketing departments have become crucial communicators. They're trying to get all this information out there, and researchers too. So, I mean, I know that sometimes like the SBA will release a little bit of information, and they it's almost like they have their own marketing agency where they're like releasing a teaser, like some point later on, we might give you more details on forgiveness, and like you have to wait and hang on. So I think it's kind of funny that it works out this way, but we just have to pay attention to that and turn around things really quickly. A lot of things, whether it's the PPP loans or even just the pandemic in general, just being able to turn around communications really fast. And that's been something that's, a really big deal when it comes to digital marketing too, is just how do you get the most amount of information out to the most amount of people quickly? And it's not going to be snail mail. It's not going to be, a letter written out to anybody. It has to be, using these digital channels that we have the ability to leverage for our messaging.
And Kate, you've got a team. What's your team makeup in the marketing department?
Sure. So we have myself, our chief marketing officer. We also have a graphic designer on our marketing department. We have a digital marketing manager, and then a project manager who oversees all the projects within the marketing team.
Cool. And Tim, in your world, marketing is Tim, from what I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, I have a VP that I report to, and we check in once a week and as needed. But it's sort of me coming up with an idea based on interacting with a staff member. Like, what if we did this? Or I've got this really great customer. Is there a way that we could focus on what we did for this customer? So it's having those conversations and being able to take in the information from them, filtering it through our marketing filter and our experience, and coming out on the digital side with a finished product. That really speaks to a lot of these things that, I think Emily said, what can I do? Well, I've kind of prided myself on being a jack of all trades in some respects. I'm not necessarily an expert on any of them. But I can turn a video around if I need to, write copy, write web code. All of those things really go into the modern digital marketer's toolbox. And I'm just really fortunate. All these experiences that I have had bouncing around from different agency to agency, you pick up these things and you learn how to do them. Like Kate was saying, we're all sort of self-taught, especially WordPress developers, and you just figure it out as you go. And what's really interesting now is, Kate, you'll probably see this too, is people are coming out of college with this toolkit already. They're learning how to do this. They're being educated how to do this. These are things that Kate and I and a lot of other people have learned the hard way over the last 10 years. So it's sound like an old man here, but it is really interesting to see like how these people are coming out and using this technology that they grew up with. But it's things like people like me that I've had to learn later in my career. And it's interesting, like we were talking about the social bankers, of seeing how these younger folks are coming to our group with this information and being able to pass it on to people like me. And I'm able to pass on experiences that I've had to them. And especially during this time where we're all trying to figure things out at the same time, it's been really beneficial.
Well, I think that's incredibly valuable that both of you have this diverse skill set to be able to jump into a WordPress site, to do graphic design when your designer's gone, or in Tim's case, all the time. I think that diverse skill set's really important, and I've used the example a couple times in presentations that I feel like the marketing role inside a community bank is the most elastic position right now. In the entire bank. There's so much that we have to learn. There's so much that we have to adapt to because the analytics are changing, the numbers are changing, the technologies are changing, and now we throw this current situation into the mix, and things are changing even faster. I think it's the fastest moving position in the bank. Would both of you agree to that? I
think so. Yeah, I think our commercial lenders are adapting to things very quickly as well, and I want to give them a shout out for all the hard work that they've done. But we're also on the digital side, and probably Kate's experiencing this too. We're supporting all types of communication that are going out, whether it's about commercial lending or operation updates. Those types of things are all going through marketing, and we're adapting. Use the word elastic, that we're flexing over here and flexing over there where we're needed. And it's been a challenge, but it's also been, I don't want to say a wild ride, but it's been really interesting to see how it's all come together.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's things change every single day, and I often say, like, I don't just wear the marketing hat. There's so many other things that we're working on, and looking at competitive analysis is no longer your rate surveys that are going out or your mystery shoppers that are going out to the different branches. We're looking at what other banks are posting online, or what their website looks like when they launch a new website, and how can we get a strategic advantage over that? So, there's a lot of other things that that we support. And as Tim said, I mean, there's so many other departments out there that you're supporting. And a lot of times it's, especially with the digital transformation, we're also providing that kind of IT support. Tim, you mentioned your commercial lending team. Like, our team is fantastic, and they've been, amazingly picking up on so many things on social media and just posting and contributing, and that's incredible to see. But a lot of it too is also making sure that they have the tools and the education to be successful, so that they will continue to buy into the program as well.
Yeah. So both of you, what would you consider is the most important characteristic for a bank marketer to have in their role today?
I'm trying to think. There's so many.
Yeah.
It really depends on what your bank specializes in, where your bank is located. Like, I always use the example, North American Banking Company is in the Twin Cities. So we're in a major market. In our marketplace, we have, if you name a big bank, they're here. We've got credit unions, we've got all these other places. So the skills that I have to bring to the table, like Kate mentioned, are I'm looking at what they're posting. I'm looking at what other banks are posting outside of our area. So that is sometimes more important in a market like the larger market that we're in. A market where, where you're maybe one of two banks in the town, you're playing with a different tool set. It's still the same tool set, but that priority shifts from from day to day or from place to place. So I'm hesitant to give you a straight answer on this, Ben, because I really don't think that there is one. We have to do a lot of different things, and I think just being able to communicate your point internally is going to get you a long ways. Like, I had this manager, one of my first interactive jobs, and he said, look, and he wasn't talking to me, he was just saying in general, I can teach you how to do this stuff. That's easy. The hard part is making it so that you're not a jerk. And for us, just being good communicators, being positive communicators right now within our organizations is doing a lot of good. And it's not just internally, but out in the community and getting that information out to the people that need it. I think that's sort of, if gun to my head, that would be the answer that I would give you.
Yeah.
Kate, how about you?
I would say I would agree. I mean, communication is something that I think is a critical skill, but I think much like Tim and I, we both have a varied background. So having, even you don't have to work in a bunch of different places and roles, but just having a good understanding of, the various digital marketing channels that are out there. You don't have to be a master of all of them, but at least you understand, what they do, what their purpose is, what kind of metrics to look for and how to speak to that. I think that's really important. You don't need to be like, oh, like I'm like a complete Facebook expert. Like, you don't need to be. I think it's just more of understanding what the channel serves a purpose to do. And also know that things will change. So as new features come out, look at what they do and how they could serve your business. So I think that's a big part too. And, I love what Tim said is just like also communicating and not being a jerk, just making sure that you're educating your people. And I know it's exhausting, and sometimes I feel like that's part of my biggest role is taking time to teach people how to upload their new LinkedIn picture, or they got locked out of their account again. And I'm like, oh, like, why am I always doing this? But it's something that when that person finally gets it and they start, doing really well or getting sales leads or whatever, and they share that success story for you, it's like totally worth it. So I think patience is key, communication, and then just understanding the digital marketing landscape.
Yeah. Well, we had, I think you're both right on. And we had some comments that were pretty similar where Julie, our friend, says, it's marketing's fast changing, but it's also not well understood. And I think that's one of the things we want to talk about today in this sort of community of people who understand that is that, it's not always understood. And Maria says flexibility, absolutely in line with what you guys are saying. And Heidi caps it off and says, yes, just like Tim and Kate, you've got to be rock stars. I agree. So when we think about this community, for an organization that, marketing's not always understood what we're trying to do and the goals that we have. We're trying to align with a lot of things. And Kate, you said, hey, you've got to understand a lot of what's going on. You can't just understand the great design. You can't understand just good content or how Facebook works. You've got to put all of this together like Tim's doing. So both of you have been a part of this community bankers group as a way to really understand this. For those of you who aren't familiar with the group and what you've done, can you give us a little explanation of what the group is and how it got together, what it's really there to do?
Sure. Like I said, when I came back from my agency to working full-time at the bank, at North American Banking Company, there was a lot of things that had changed. I started reaching out to people and getting answers, and turns out they had some questions for me, like, oh, how did you do that? And what was the reason that you did this? And it started sort of an email thread between like Caitlin, myself, Emily, and then I met Emily and Tara Salinas at a conference here in Minneapolis. And something just sort of clicked with me, like, oh, well, no one has all the answers. What if we just somehow pooled our resources, pooled our knowledge, and found a way online? We're all digital folks. Found a way to meet online once a month, or have some sort of a chat group once a month. Just kind of keep something going where if I had a question, I could just ask the question to the group, and vice versa. That started off, like I said, we reached out to a couple different people, got it going. Never really having a real agenda for the group, just sort of a knowledge base, if you will. As that group evolved, we started kind of thinking, well, what could it be? I was really adamant that I didn't want there to be a lot of restrictions on the group. I didn't want there to be, part of it was just, it was easier not to have these restrictions. But part of it too is I joined a lot of different professional organizations in my agency days. And there was always these artificial requirements, whether it was a fee or you had to kick a certain percentage of business to other people in the group or whatever those restraints were. I just wanted to have something where I didn't have any of those. So the idea then just sort of took off exponentially from there. We thought, well, we should probably give ourselves a name, because I think it started off like, what was it, Kate, like the bankers support group or something like that. I mean, there was no name, and it just started off like we'd meet on a video chat and say, well, what are you working on? What are you stuck on? Does someone want to talk about what they did? And there was, like I said, no agenda whatsoever. Now we've evolved it to, I think, how many members? We've got 25 different members right now, something like that, at banks across the country. We've had to implement a couple restrictions, just of your only obligation is to contribute to the group. You can't just take information. Thanks for putting a website up there. You can't contribute. If you don't contribute, you can't be in it. And we also make it so that the things that we're sharing, we don't have any competition in the group. So if I'm in Minneapolis, I can't have a local bank that's going to hear what I'm talking about and take that information and run with it. So that's really been it. It's evolved now to the point, and sorry if you want to just cut me off and go to something else, Ben, but it's evolved now to this point where during COVID, we started just saying, well, we're all dispersed, right? We're working from home. Some of us are in the bank. Let's just get together on a Friday, have a video chat at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and just talk about what you went through this week. And I think we had an intention of doing it just that one week, that first week when everyone left. It's now every week. It's now to the point where we've had to start different video systems to accommodate the level of people that want to be in the group and want to be on the chat. So again, as you can see by the URL that we've shared, we're not on a fancy website. Well, Julie did the website. We've got a Squarespace site hosted on Squarespace, which is, I think, $12 a year or something like that. So, but what we're seeing coming out of this group is this pooling of resources and pooling of knowledge that's not only lifting up our individual banks. I've gotten to be a better bank marketer as a result of it. And I think other people are saying the same thing, but people are also saying how much more confident they've become in their job and as a result of the group. And it's really sort of interesting to see how it has evolved organically from something that was just like, I've got some questions, to now to what it is today. I don't know, Caitlin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just, that information share has been super helpful, not just during the pandemic, but, times before that too. There's a lot of things that are out there that many of us are dealing with that there's not even regulation for yet. So we keep on, asking questions like, hey, have you encountered this, or how are you handling this? And, it's just really been helpful for all of us to share some ideas, and also share some feedback. Some people have pitched out ideas for campaigns or posts or things and gotten some feedback on it, and some of it's positive, some of it's negative, but it's always great to, float it by a group of people who have a good understanding of the purpose of that content.
I think too, one of our members a couple of weeks ago said he feels like he's got a marketing department. He's gone from a marketing department of 1 to a marketing department of 20, where he's got the resources and information that he needs to make his job a lot easier. Again, we don't know where the group is heading, and that's purposeful. As a banker, we're always very, and project managers like Caitlin and I, were very focused on what's next. But right now, we're just sort of taking it and figuring out and making it be a resource to people in real time. There's questions that come up like Caitlin mentioned, the regulatory issue. How do you handle this? And that 2 years ago, if I had that question, I would have spent a couple hours doing a web search. Now you get it, I don't know, in a matter of 5 minutes. Someone's throwing it up on Slack and saying, yeah, well, here's what we did, and here's the best way that I found to do it. And then someone else will double down on that with another bit of information. So it's been really helpful for me, and I hope hopefully helpful for others too.
Well, it's been incredible for me to have a lot of those conversations. And just like both of you said, one of the stories I would think of is a few weeks ago when we had somebody who was presenting and said, I have a big presentation to do on Monday. Would it be okay if I presented this to the group on Friday as a practice? But also we all got to learn from it. And then, I happened to have a call with her on Tuesday and said, how did it go? And she said, I was so prepared. It was fantastic because I'd done it before. And, this group was there for that. And I think it's a huge career lifter, but I just think I've just appreciated the community of the group. I think that's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's been one of the interesting things about it. And we talk about the knowledge that's being shared and the information, but I think legitimately everyone comes to our Friday chats thinking, well, I get to hang out with my friends. And that's been really interesting to see that evolve. I've never met Kate in person, and I think I've known you for 3 years now or something like that. So it's being able to meet with other people that are going through what you're going through. Ben used the word community. I mean, that's exactly what this has become, is just a community of people that want to share and hang out together. And Tim Stark mentioned the trivia. We do have an ongoing trivia contest as part of our Friday meetings. So he's on sometimes and he's off other times, just like all of us.
I have yet to win it. Kate, you won it, right?
I think it was a 3-way tie last week. So
okay,
not a full win. So
you're a step ahead of me by at least qualifying there for the top spot. So that's much better than I've done. We're starting to get some questions in here, and Julie has a question. How has your timeline changed from campaign idea to launch, working with within your FI as opposed to when you were working in an agency? Any feedback on that one?
Go ahead, Kate.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a few years, but I think if we're launching like an entire campaign for a business, I mean, our timeline is sometimes, starting the whole process of what was the goal, what was the targets, formulating everything. And then of course you have to pitch it. So that actually takes the most amount of time, is to pitch that campaign idea, and hopefully they like it, right? And sometimes you're pitching more than one, and hopefully they like one of the options that you provide. But going through that process and then launching the campaign is sometimes longer because of that. But I would say once you actually have a solid yes in an agency, and then you start moving forward with it, particularly in digital. I mean, a lot of things we would turn around within a week or two. A lot of website builds, depending on what kind of company it was, we would have that turned around in less than a month. Again, depends on what it was. If it was a heavy e-commerce site, it might take longer. I'd say for banking, like obviously it takes longer. We just did an entire rebrand project with Avidia, and that took us almost 2 years of work to do all the research behind it, create our new branding, launch the new campaign, get all the approvals and everything else. And I don't expect things to take as long in the future. Now it's more like 2 or 3 months before we actually get a campaign launch, but that's a lot of moving parts too.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It certainly depends on the project. Comparing an agency project to something we might do here, my agencies, I was managing teams of 25, 30 people. So when you introduce those moving parts into something more complex, it's really hard to compare. But I would say right now I'm a team of one. If I bring in a freelancer or someone else to help me, we can move really quickly. But I'm hesitant to compare it to agency days, just because agency had, Kate can attest, I mean, there's just so many more people with an opinion on it. There might be a project like Kate mentioned, her horse excrement project. We had one that came in that was a bacon. It was an app for your phone where it was an alarm clock, and the hands were a frying pan, and you would line it up, and when the alarm went off, there was a scent piece to the phone, and the scent would kick out the smell of cooked bacon.
What?
And
wow.
it was like this whole black hat thing where I had to go to this agency to get the device to be able to test it, and cruising around Chicago on the streets with this thing. And but so that's a kind of a challenging project that took, by the time we got it to the time we finished, it was probably 6 months. Mm-hmm. If I was doing a simple web build here at the bank, it would probably, well, we're doing one, and it'll probably take me about 6 months to do that as well.
Yeah.
So it's hard to explain. If you haven't worked in an agency, it's really hard to understand how many parts are involved in these projects and how many people have to weigh in on it. So even though at the bank you've got regulatory issues and things that, Caitlin mentioned that people have to weigh in on, the agency side, you've got multiple rounds of client review and design review and internal review. And it just, a simple campaign can stretch out to be a real long time on either side.
Yeah.
Well, I love that part of what you've brought, what both of you have brought, is this agency background of, hey, you had an office in which you had a whole bunch of marketers communicating about ideas and trying to pitch them. And in a sense, you've sort of brought an agency approach to the social bankers, right? Like, we sort of have this ability now to sort of connect with each other and say, what are you thinking about pitching to your bank? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a unique thing, I really think.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been, like we talked about earlier, a place where you can pitch an idea and get honest feedback. I remember I pitched a video that we shot, and I said, I knew what I thought about it. And I said, what do you guys think about it? And the honest feedback I got from it was really good. It wasn't people just saying, oh, that's so great, good job. It was, I don't know, might want to think about that one. But then there's also times when this group has been incredibly supportive too. Like if they like what you're doing, the feedback that they give you is very, like, you can come up with this wild idea and people would say, like, that's great, can I borrow it? Mm-hmm. And getting that kind of feedback is really a great part of this group. Good or bad, that feedback, but yeah, we're able to talk about these things in a setting that's nearly real time, like we're in the same room. And in fact, when I was managing larger web builds, I did work from home and I managed most of these folks over Slack. So what we're doing now is sort of old hat for me.
That's perfect. Well, I'd like to think about what both of you think is next as we're kind of coming into the summer months. Both of you, it would appear, are still working from home. You have any plans to go back to the office? How is that? Is that on the schedule, or is that still in the kind of distant future?
For me, it's probably still in the distant future. We haven't made any decisions on dates yet. We're kind of just waiting to see how the reopening of the state goes. But I mean, I'm pretty self-sufficient at home, which is nice. And, part of my team is, or I should say the whole marketing team has worked from home off and on prior to the pandemic. So we've been used to communicating in this way. So it hasn't been too challenging for us. But in terms of looking at our overall marketing strategy, I mean, a lot of things that we had slated for the spring are probably going to take place in the fall now. It's kind of nice because, we're just kind of tweaking that message a little bit, but obviously the different tone is going to change a little bit, and just make sure that, we're taking the approach of just being cautious what we put out there and not trying to plan too far ahead, particularly in our content.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I'm at home presently. I'm not sure when I'm going to be going back. Like Keelan said, there's probably a date out there, but for now I'm here. I'm fairly self-sufficient at home, so that's not an issue. Yeah, we've had to pivot pretty extensively on our content. That a lot of our, like I mentioned before, we've got so many large banks here, impersonal banks. So a lot of our marketing was, come on in, have a conversation, sit across the desk from a banker who knows what you're going through. Making that pivot has been really tough, especially as a department of one, going through our website and redoing content on the fly, taking down photos, reshooting photos if we could. So we're now kind of in a wait and see approach. Our lobbies are not open. Our banks are still functioning. Drive-throughs are open. Banking by appointment, all of those things. But now it's just sort of a wait and see approach that we're going to continue our messaging, into the summer and the fall, of course. But we're not planning anything large scale just yet. I think we have to take a wait and see approach, and then figuring out when it's okay to transition back to that messaging of, come on in, come see us, sit across the table from a banker and have a conversation. Our bankers are doing a fantastic job under the circumstances, whether they're working remote or they're by the phone or however they're doing it. Kate and I are used to this environment of working from home and working remotely. For a lot of folks, they've never done it before. So we have to keep in mind too that as people that have done this, we're also supporting the folks at our banks that haven't done it before. Mm-hmm. And no one's gone through this situation before either. So we also have to remember that no one's got a playbook for this. Yeah. And there's no customer guide either that says you have to, on this date, you have to release this type of customer communication. So that's where this group has been really helpful, of seeing what people are going through. I think Caitlin's area was one of the first areas that was in our group that was hit the hardest by COVID, and being able to see and hear what she was going through, knowing that it was coming our way in about 2 to 3 weeks, being able to prepare a game plan ahead of that was really beneficial for us. Unfortunately, for the community that she's in, it was hit pretty hard, and we're being hit very, very hard right now. So it's been sort of a wait and see approach for all of our marketing, not trying to get too far ahead of ourselves, but at the same time knowing that changes are coming soon.
Yeah, I appreciate that thought process, because I think, Kate, you've been a great advocate inside the group for all of us to say, hey, this is, you're ahead of that curve that we've been on in the Midwest. And so have certainly learned a lot about the communication and the sensitivity around a lot of these subjects. I think is another reason why we need a group. I've had a lot of moments in the last few months where normally I wouldn't second guess my content. but all of a sudden, something's coming out and we're thinking, is that insensitive? Photos, like you mentioned, Tim, suddenly those photos of handshakes just aren't fashionable anymore.
They are not. And finding out how do you show that energy, that warmth and connection in a photo. That we always wanted to say, like, our photos would be people that work at the bank. They're real life people. Well, we've had to shift a little bit more to stock photos to be able to on the fly replace that feeling. Gradually we'll start working those photos in, some social distancing photos in the bank of people standing together having a conversation 6 feet apart. But until our lobbies are open, we're just sort of, I don't want to say winging it, but we're definitely playing it by ear, figuring out day to day, week to week what we're going to do.
Yeah. And Kate, your team was early in this movement of brand ambassadors with the Bank Smart team and everybody sort of moving out into the field. How has that evolved as your social media strategy in the last couple of months?
Yeah, that's, initially when the pandemic hit, and I think that's all of us, we kind of were paralyzed. What do you put out there for messaging? And then even on the internal employee side, people are like, I don't know if I want to post anything or like promote products and services. And so we really put it out there and said, listen, like, we know it's a weird time. This is what we're doing from the brand pages, and this is our expectations of you if you're going to be sharing things. And they've done fantastic. We've had employees who work in the branches that are sharing day-to-day life moments, handing out gift cards to local businesses, taking pictures of customers who are coming in, buying lunch at local businesses, and just, showcasing them in a whole different way too on social. And I think that that's been hugely beneficial, and it's very authentic, instead of just being like, oh, well, here's our relief program or whatever. But things like showing what we're actually doing in the community and putting that personal touch on it, and also having that location behind it, which has been really key. In our commercial side, I mean, we've seen, our commercial team who've, as we talked about earlier, really done an amazing job with the PPP loans and working day and night and over the weekends and everything. And, and they've documented that, and they've shared it on their LinkedIn profiles, and they've talked about how difficult it's been. And to that effect, we've also gotten a lot of testimonials where businesses have come back and they're like, I love my banker because they worked till 3 a.m. on Saturday and got me my loan and are helping me and saving my business. So it's been a really great opportunity for content that's very heartfelt and stuff that's really hard to come by too. I think, like, if we weren't in the pandemic, I probably wouldn't see any of those reviews or testimonials. But it's been really powerful. And I think, it's also made a lot of our team members bigger believers in social media and the power of that, given that that's where everyone's gravitating to during the pandemic. So our advocacy is really through the roof now that we've kind of gotten into a good cadence with it.
Mm-hmm. Have you felt that as well, Tim, that the sort of bank as a whole has rallied a little bit more around the social media initiatives?
I think so. We've been much more focused these days on, because we're a commercial lender, a commercial bank, focusing on the businesses that we're serving. The less about how hard our team's working, because I think if you're saying that you're a community bank and you're going through this, I think that's a given. We've just made that choice. We've said how many loans we've cleared or closed. We've said how many dollars that's been. But we as an organization have felt that if we're positioning ourselves as your friendly neighborhood bank, when your neighbor comes down and helps you cut down a tree in your backyard, he doesn't tell you about how many hours he put in fixing it. So that's a choice that we've made in our marketing. But we've seen more people internally get on board with the work that we're doing and saying, is there a way I can contribute this content? Let us know. They're more reactive to things that are also getting posted on social media than they have before.
Yeah.
So that's been a real positive impact internally at the bank, that our lenders have been a little more active on social than they had been before.
No, that's great. That's great to hear that they're kind of rallying around that and supporting both of you. So you've got campaigns, Kate. You said maybe fall. Some of those spring ones got pushed to fall. You've got some changes in the way we talk about things. How do we think the role of banking and really bank marketing for a community bank? How do we think that's going to change throughout this summer? Do we feel like there's going to be some differences that are a little bit more long-term in the way we think of marketing within a community bank?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, people are just gravitating towards that social media, online marketing, finding ways to do business still without having that direct contact with people. And as Tim conveyed, it's really difficult to do when you're like, well, we're your friendly community banker and come in and see us, but really don't, but go online. So that's really hard. And so I think figuring out that equation is going to be a challenge, but I think it's something that community banks do really well, and they're just going to have to, adapt, more digital marketing strategies. And I think I've already seen that. There's so many people in various circles that I'm in that work at banks and credit unions who have said, yeah, we really need to start a social media program for the first time, or we need to launch our website and make sure we can have an online account opening. And these are things that they're doing for the first time. So I think over the summer, you'll see some serious digital transformation.
I agree. That was one of the first things when we launched our social media platforms. People, and I don't think you'll probably hear this from any person that wants to follow their bank, of what's in it for me. People would say, what are you going to communicate to me via social media that's going to improve my daily life or get me the information that I need? That's been sort of a touchstone of all of our posts that we've put out, whether it's been during COVID or before COVID or whatever, is providing some sort of value to the people that are following us. And I'm not talking about monetary value or anything like that. It's giving them resources and information and giving them a sense of what the bank stands for in our community. And we've been really successful so far with that. We've had people come in saying, I saw your commercial, or I heard your radio ad, or I've seen your posts. All of those things that we're producing, whether they're videos or radio ads, they all have a digital component now as well. So things that, 10 years ago, we were probably just doing print. Now, we're across all these different spectrums. So people are hearing about us on all these different platforms as well, with digital being the main one.
I love that you're combining both when you're even talking about that, because it's something that I share a lot of times, that like my next door neighbor doesn't come ring my doorbell anymore. Like they text me and say, hey, are you home? Or hey, your garage door's open, or hey, I can come over. Like, even though proximity isn't an issue, we could yell over the fence. We're still using a digital tool in which to facilitate that relationship. And I think that's one of the things that leadership might be sort of getting on board in a way that they never were before, in that, hey, it doesn't mean that we don't want to have these personal face-to-face connections, but there's more efficient ways to do this. And that's the way most people are choosing to do it.
I think that it has to be on that person's terms. Yeah. That type of communication, whether it's face-to-face or whatever type of communication is, you have to figure out your audience and then figure out how you're going to best reach that audience. Like you mentioned, your neighbor, you could shout over the fence and he may or may not hear you, but if you text him, he's probably going to get it right away and he's going to respond to it. That's been the interesting part of seeing how bank communication has evolved. I think community banks in particular are figuring this out at a faster rate. We're not just providing, we're providing some type of community. That's a buzzword right now, but we're providing that information in a way that makes it sound like it's coming from a trusted neighbor, that person you're going to yell over at the fence to say your garage door is open. But finding the best and most appropriate digital platform to reach that person on has been the challenge that we all face right now.
Kate, has that felt authentic for your bank, sort of in that transition over the last couple months? Or do you feel like there's been some hurdles in making that happen?
I I think it has been authentic to us. I mean, obviously there's always going to be hurdles, and people, as Tim said, you have to, there's this opt-in society, and how are you going to reach the right person, and they have to opt in with their email address, or they have to opt in and follow you on social media. And, I think that's sometimes a challenge, but, integrating different multimedia is really important too. Tim brought up, using radio spots and TV spots. So we still do use those channels and produce content. And I think that's incredibly valuable, in the hopes that people will go to our website, or will learn about us more on Facebook, or fill out a lead form, or whatever have you. And, I think that's really helped and raise our brand awareness, but also making sure the tonality is in the right place too, which is a challenge too, because you don't want to sit here reaching for new accounts or reaching for new business when it's really just not the right time. So we just try to showcase that we're a genuine partner on all of our channels and our messaging.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Well, both of you are doing a fantastic job. I get to see some of it up close and some of it at a distance, and I see a lot of good content, a lot of good digital marketing. So both of you really are, as Heidi said earlier, I'll say it again, both of you are rock stars in this industry, doing some fantastic stuff for bank marketers. And I also want to really thank you for the community that you have built and continue to build with social bankers. Would both of you like to say a little challenge for all of us? Maybe it's for joining the social bankers. We had one applicant while we were here, so I saw that in the comments section. I'm sure there are more. Any comments for the social bankers, or for things you'd like to encourage this community on?
Go ahead, Kate.
Well, I mean, obviously we're talking a lot about social media. One thing I would say is to challenge yourself to go out and try something different that you haven't done before, whether you're just experimenting with a new platform, seeing, what hashtags might be available that you could use, experimenting with different content out there. I think this is a really great opportunity to test things and take some time and really create a solid social media strategy. And by learning what's out there, you're just going to benefit from it, even if you're not going to be a heavy user of it. And it's also on my list too, because Ben, I know you've been pushing TikTok a lot, so I'm going to have to check it out. So I'm going to accept that own challenge there and try to go for it.
That's funny. Yeah, I would second what Caitlin said. I'd also say, follow. Don't just follow a bank. Follow different organizations that you're interested in. See how they're communicating during this time, and general how they're doing it, and see if, like, I follow Disney World. I've got the blog seeingthemouse.com plug for it, but I look at see how they're communicating during this time. How people can't go to their parks. How are they showing, and how are they building a community of people when you can't actually physically go there? And then trying to figure out, sort of reverse engineer that from a marketing standpoint. How do you do that? How do you build what they're building? Not just Disney World, but I look at other banks too. Like, that's how this social bankers all started. Was I saw posts that Kate was putting together and thought, well, I'll just ask her how she did it. Reverse engineering, good ideas. Some might call it stealing, but we call it sharing in our business. With the social bankers, whenever we see something that we like, we just ask for permission. Hey, could I try that? And 9 times out of 10, you'll get a thumbs up on it. Yeah. In terms of a challenge to the group, I would say let's expand west of Nebraska. That's our east to west delineation right now. Nebraska's as far west as we go, so we would certainly like to see what community bankers in California and Portland and Oregon and those areas, what they're doing. Helps, as we say, a rising tide lifts all ships. So whatever we can do to lift all of our ships, let's do it.
Cool. Well, no, I appreciate that. And like I said, we've had at least one more applicant while we've been here. So hopefully we'll have some more. I know as the social bankers who jumped on, thanks to all of them for jumping in and for being a part of this community. And really, whether you're in the social bankers or you're on the outside connecting with this group, it's an incredibly open group. So even if that's something to just connect one-on-one with people, if there's somebody that you're overlapping with competition-wise, which I know, Tim, that's something you've been very careful to make sure that that people don't feel there's a competition there. If there's people that aren't in that situation where they're able to apply, I think it's still a group that would love to connect with you in one way or another. So maybe there's a couple people out of that group that can still connect. So Tim, Kate, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, this has been great, and I'm excited to keep seeing what's in store for the Social Bankers Group as we kick into the summer and see. We started in at an awkward time, and here we are continuing to grow that group, and it's really flourished in a really difficult time, and I think that's a testament to both of your leadership. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too, Ben. I mean, a lot of us met doing being on your webinars. We would be, messaging you different gifts as you're trying to show us different ins and outs, and I was railing against you on Nebraska sports and all that. But
it's all good fun.
That just sort of shows the sense of community that we've built. That we're all coming from these different directions, but some of us met through your services. So we really do thank you for making the introduction for all of us.
Yeah, well, thank you both, and we've got some more planned in the coming weeks, so we'll keep up with the social lives, and with that, we'll catch everyone next week.
Good.
Thanks.